In the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, the worst possible scenario for Russia has come into play with the statements made by Wagner Group leader Prigozhin. One of the parties in the long-standing power struggle in Russia, the country has literally come to the brink of civil war. The tension between potential Shoigu and Prigozhin has now reached an uncontrollable level. Russia's last move against Wagner was the last straw. So, what is happening in Russia? Let's take a look at the latest developments. Together with the developments in the night hours, both the Russian media and the world media mobilized. According to the allegations, Wagner Group leader Prigozhin blamed Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and declared war against all of Russia. Initially, these claims were characterized as mere allegations. However, as time passed, the news became clearer. According to many experts, the long-awaited civil war in Russia has officially begun. So, what caused it? The emergence of the civil war started with images shared on Telegram channels close to the Wagner Group. In the footage, Wagner personnel filming the Wagner headquarters made the following statements about the situation in the region. "Our headquarters was blown up by a missile attack from behind us. All of our personnel who were in the headquarters during the attack were killed. The Ukrainian army could not have launched this attack on us because they are in front of us. These missiles were fired by the Russian Federation." After the video was published on the Telegram channel, many social media accounts also shared the video. It is seen that especially pro-Wagner accounts shared these images and heavily insulted Russia. While social media was buzzing with these videos, the Wagner Group's Council of Commanders was holding a meeting about the developments. During the meeting, some remarkable reports started coming from Bakhmut. According to unconfirmed reports, a hot clash broke out between Russian troops and Wagner militia on the Bakhmut line. After the attack hit the world agenda, Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin released a voice message and officially declared war on Russia. Prigozhin, who released the voice message after the Council of Commanders meeting, declared war on Russia as follows: "I am announcing the decisions of the PMC Wagner Commanders Council. The evil of the country's military leadership must be stopped. They neglect the lives of soldiers. They have forgotten the word justice. We will bring it back. Those who destroyed our men, who destroyed the lives of tens and tens of thousands of Russian soldiers today will be punished. No one stands up against the wrong decisions of the Russian military leadership. We will stand against them, but we will consider anyone who tries to oppose us as a danger, and we will immediately destroy them, including checkpoints on our way. And we will not allow any Russian aviation activity in our airspace. I ask everyone to remain calm. Do not succumb to provocations, and stay at home. Do not confront us. We will finish what we started and return to the front to defend our homeland. The President's office, the government, the Interior Ministry, Rosguardia, and other departments will continue to work as before. We will deal with those who destroyed Russian soldiers, and we will return to the front. Those who run our country have forgotten the word justice, and they criminalized anyone who uttered it. But now is the time for justice. Anyone who forgets the word justice will be severely punished. Justice will be restored in the army, and after that, justice for all of Russia." The rapid dissemination of Prigozhin's statements caused quite a panic in Russia. The Russian government started implementing a blackout policy to prevent the spread. According to reports, Russian media and Telegram channels were banned from broadcasting Prigozhin's statements. Following these statements by the Wagner leader, a remarkable development took place in St. Petersburg. According to local sources, the St. Petersburg police have mobilized to carry out a raid on Wagner's office in the city in the coming days. The possibility of Wagner's offices being raided by Russian police is expected to increase. We know that the leader of the Wagner Group has recently made statements accusing the Russian Federation of betraying the Russian people. However, most of these statements were criticizing Sergei Shoigu. In the latest incident, Prigozhin again called out Sergei Shoigu and threatened him. According to Prigozhin, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu gave the order to shoot the Wagner militiamen who died in the attack on the headquarters. Following the Wagner leader's statements, the whole of Russia went into red alert mode. It is claimed that many official organizations have stepped in and tried to negotiate with the Wagner Group. However, so far, no situation has been reported to show that tensions have been reduced. The involvement of the Russian intelligence service, the Federal Security Service, shows that the Kremlin is very afraid that Wagner's call will mobilize a large group of people. According to Wagner Group leader Prigozhin, this is not a military coup. Prigozhin calls this mobilization and march for justice. Local sources also report that 25,000 Wagner personnel are mobilized. So, what will happen now? Recent reports show that the already precarious stability in Russia is on the verge of very dark days. Many military experts and Russian officials say that this could lead to even bigger problems. One of them is Igor Strelkov, who is with the Ministry of Defense of the Donetsk People's Republic and has been accused of war crimes in eastern Ukraine. He also made a statement on the latest developments and supported the allegations of a military coup. Strelkov's statements are as follows: "We are facing a big problem, a problem so big that it could affect the fate of the whole war." These developments clearly show us that a military coup has begun. Civil unrest could lead us to a catastrophe. The Kremlin, which remained silent for a long time after the Wagner leader's statements, made a rather calm statement about the latest situation later in the night. In the official statement made by the Kremlin, the following statements were used. Putin is carefully following all developments. We are aware of the developments around Prigozhin. All measures will be taken immediately by President Putin. Despite the Kremlin's level-headed statements, some units of the Russian military are said to be on high alert. Many local sources claim that Russian troops have been ordered to be prepared for a possible attack by Wagner. According to the latest reports, the Russian Air Force has also mobilized. There is a lot of unconfirmed information coming out of the region. However, according to one confirmed report, a special rapid response unit of Russia's Interior Ministry was dispatched by plane from Moscow to Belgorod Oblast on the border with Ukraine. Allegedly, the fact that this unit has moved to an area near Wagner indicates that the possibility of a hot clash between Russian troops and Wagner's militia has increased. Kiev launched attacks and gained ground in several places along the front line against the Moscow troops. Ukraine continues to lead its offensive to gain ground and inflict casualties with skilled infantry units, deliberate attacks, and small-scale offensive tactics. The counter-offensive of the Ukrainian armed forces in the first week has so far been deliberate and methodical. Ukrainians combine drones and armored vehicles in targeted attacks on short-range targets, usually no more than 1 or 2 forest lines or villages. Ukrainian flags flying over settlements in the Donetsk region in Zaporizhia Oblast were touted by Ukraine as a sign of early progress. There were concerns that the collapse of the Novokakhovka Dam in the Kherson region, for which Kiev blames Moscow, would affect Ukraine's counterattack plans. Ukrainian General Staff spokesman Andriy Kovalev recently announced that Kiev forces have liberated more than 38 mi since the counteroffensive began, as Kiev said the offensive was underway. Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister, Anna Maliar, said the operation, which was carried out in at least 4 directions, said Kiev forces were advancing several hundred yards northeast and south of Bakhmut city in Donetsk. Maliar announced progress of up to 1,000 meters around the border between Donetsk and Zaporizhia, liberating an area of about 1.15 mi. The Ukrainians crowned this successful advance with offensive operations in the direction of Tavria in this region. The Russians of the Ukrainian Defense Forces continued to disperse their positions while the Ukrainian troops continued the attack at full speed. The Ukrainian commander reported that about 500 Russian soldiers were destroyed in the direction of Tavria on the Tavria axis in southern Ukraine. The Russian army lost about 5 military divisions. This figure is seriously high. For a long time, the Russians had not faced such a huge number of casualties. The most striking of the losses in Tavria was the destruction of 6 Russian ammunition depots, along with 500 Russian soldiers during offensive operations in Tavria. 56 Russian military equipment were destroyed and damaged. The most notable of these were the destruction of 9 tanks, 30 heavy armored combat vehicles, and 7 special Soviet howitzers belonging to the Russian army. On the Tavria front, the Russians also lost a Stellar-10 air defense system, an Uragan air defense system, 3 Zitali warfare systems, a Pol-2 warfare system, and 4 UAVs. The losses of the Russians in a single attack by the Ukrainian forces were officialized by the Ukrainian General Staff. This went down in war history as one of the heaviest losses of the Russian army in daily combat in a single region. This feat belonged to the 10th Operational Army of Ukraine. The Ukrainian 10th Operational Cause consists of units equipped with incredible offensive capabilities where the most elite Ukrainian brigades are recruited. The Russian troops had neither the equipment nor the morals to face such a massive offensive. The survivors of the Russian troops fled towards the interior of Donetsk and Luhansk. General Alexander Tarnavsky, the commander of the Tavria Operational Strategic Unit Grouping, said the defenders of the Tavria region confidently continue their defense, continuing to destroy the invaders. The Ukrainian armed forces, especially in recent days, started to advance east towards Volodar from the direction of Tavria. The aim of the Ukrainians here was to create an offensive corridor from Zaporizhia to the Donetsk front lines and to take control of the areas from Donetsk to Luhansk. Recently, the Ukrainian army took a critical step in this regard. Ukrainian defense forces, in the direction of Tavria, advanced 1 kilometer in the Volodar area. Now, critical developments were expected in Volodar as the Ukrainians gained a great advantage in the Zaporizhia and Donetsk offensive corridor. It is therefore not surprising that the Ukrainians sent reinforcements to Volodar from the direction of Tavria. Also, if you remember, the missile units and artillery units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces in the direction of Tavria recently completed 1577 firing missions in total. After these attacks, the Russian forces also predicted that the Ukrainians would head towards Volodar after the Zaporizhia front lines. The intensity of the fighting near Bakhmut was somewhat diminished as Ukraine carried out successful offensive actions in certain areas, captured the dominant heights and forest belts, and made every effort to stop the advance by reinforcing the enemy's troops. Independent information sources and Russian military bloggers all agree that Kiev's top military leadership has followed the conservative strategy of eroding Russian formations over time, gradually gaining ground, avoiding major risks, and limiting Ukrainian losses as much as possible. Even pro-Russian sources admit that Ukraine's deliberate tactics are unusual but undeniably gaining ground. Putin is experiencing an early setback in Ukraine's counteroffensive. Despite taking measures against the long-awaited Ukrainian offensive, Russian President Vladimir Putin seems to have a headache because he again underestimated the Ukrainians. Considering the heavy blows he received on the front and the areas lost, the soldiers of the Russian army suffered heavy defeats in a short time with the Ukrainian offensive. Ukrainian forces made significant gains in the counterattack, recapturing several settlements from Russia. However, experts see Ukraine as an advantage in the face of these successes, although it's too early to say whether the long-awaited attack against Vladimir Putin's troops will be successful. Russian positions falling day by day caused concern in the Kremlin. The cost of the protracted war for Russia is increasing daily. Another thing that potentially worries the Russians is the possibility of the Ukrainians retaking the city of Melitopol, dividing the Russian forces in the Crimea and Donbass. Ukrainian forces are potentially at an advantage over depleted Russian forces which are mobilized and exposed to attacks that are not yet fully clashed. After Putin's troops withdrew from Kharkiv in September 2022, the Russians had built one of the most elaborate and complex defense fortification systems. Jack Watling, senior research fellow in ground warfare at the United Royal Service Institute, reported in a recently published analysis that Kiev forces had broken through the first engagement positions on part of the front. However, Jack Watling added that they are still some distance from Russia's main line of defense. So the Ukrainian forces are making gains, but the offensive is a little far from its decisive stage. The war will probably get harder. However, if Ukraine can force Putin's units to redeploy, the training and discipline of Moscow's forces could leave the defense uncoordinated and prone to collapse. Attacks on targets inside Russia, such as oil depots and border towns, are a clear challenge to Putin. A major breakthrough that cuts off the land bridge to Crimea could be a cause for serious concern for him. The Russian defense is under increasing pressure, considering the point reached in the war. The enormous price Russia is currently paying will increase. And most importantly, Putin is unprepared for the negative consequences of the Ukrainian offensive in Russia. It signaled that the adverse effects of Putin's disastrous imperialist war of conquest were getting closer and closer to the heart of Russian power. These offensives, part of a long, escalating series of attacks, herald the approach of a major offensive against Russia and Russian-controlled Ukrainian territory. They give the message that the scene of the upcoming battles will not be limited to the geography of Ukraine or even the Russian border region, which is used as a preparation area for war. As a result of heavy airstrikes by the Ukrainian Eagles, 8 Russian arsenals, 2 headquarters, 15 Russian position clusters, and 7 air defense systems were destroyed in critical areas. The Ukrainian Air Force is currently able to disable Russian air defense systems with AGM-88 HARM missiles. In addition, Su-24 heavy bombers can fire Storm Shadow short-range ballistic missiles. This is a very powerful factor that completely turned the general course of the war in favor of Ukraine. Recently, we see that the British Storm Shadow missiles have become legendary in the hands of the Ukrainian Air Force, especially on the southern front. We hear Storm Shadow roaring over the Russian Army headquarters in Kherson, Zaporizhia, the port of Berdyansk, and the port of Mariupol, and all over the Black Sea coast. In addition, our soldiers destroyed an enemy Ka-52 attack helicopter and 7 reconnaissance UAVs at the operational tactical level. According to the report of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Kiev missile and artillery units struck an enemy command post, 3 personal clusters, 5 artillery units in firing positions, 4 electronic warfare stations, and 2 more important enemy objects. As you can see, the Air Force has a very important role in the war. Kiev forces are not only destroying Russian airstrikes, but also achieving tremendous success with their own air force. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that units of the Eastern Forces Group repelled for Ukrainian attacks near Orikhiv, Zaporizhia Oblast, and Western Donetsk Oblast. Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister, Hanna Maliar, reported that Russian forces have deployed significant forces to stop the Ukrainian attacks, making it difficult for Ukraine to advance. Maliar added that the ongoing Ukrainian operations have several tasks that do not focus solely on liberating the territory, and that the Ukrainian forces have not yet started the main phase of counterattack operations. As you can see, the war continues with all its anger for both sides. However, hundreds of positions are brutally beaten by the Ukrainian Air Force. The destruction caused on enemy lines cannot be disputed. Both the surface-to-air defense systems of the Western Allies and the weapons and training aid provided directly to the Air Force are also part of these victories. So why is the Russian Air Force not successful in the Ukraine skies despite its magnificent fleets? Before continuing our video, I would like to remind you again, if you are against the invasion of Ukraine and wanted to support our work with my team, you can like our video, comment, and hit the super thanks button below. Ukraine's allies claim they prioritize ground-based air defense support and that the missiles they provide impede Russia's air superiority. Earlier, the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, stated that the USA and its partners emphasized ground-air defense as the best and fastest way to stop Russia at the start of the war. There were other ways to thwart Russian forces' air superiority over Ukraine. However, some officials oppose the provision of the F-16 based on a cost-effectiveness analysis. It ignores some military fundamentals. It cannot be said that the analyses made are very unfair. There is a cost of $2 billion for an average of 10 aircraft. The Russians have thousands of 4th and 5th generation fighter jets. So if you are going to compete with Russia in the air, you are going to need a lot of advanced and modern aircraft. Significant amount of 4th and 5th generation warplanes. When looking at and analyzing the cost curve, it seems that this is not very realistic. The wisest thing to do was to provide surface-to-air defense systems exactly as the Western states do. Thus, the Russians were prevented from using their air force effectively. Ukraine received modern Western air defense systems such as Patriot NASAMS. It is the same air defense systems. These weapons allow Ukraine to shoot down missiles that it could not stop before. According to the analysis, it was determined that at least 563 missiles and 533 of the Iranian-made Shah drones were shot down in Ukraine in May. Russia carried out about 20 combined missile and drone strikes last month, many of which were launched against the capital. Ukrainian forces neutralized 90% of these attacks. This information gives the impression that Ukraine is protected by a powerful network of air defense systems. However, taken as a whole, this is not entirely true. Kiev is much better protected than any other city, village, or settlement in Ukraine. It would be useful to make a realistic analysis of the air defense systems that Ukraine has. Let's take a look at the air defense systems of Ukraine in general terms. First of all, 89% of Ukraine's air defense system consisted of Soviet legacy systems such as the S-300 and the Buk. In addition, these missile systems are slowly running out. It was estimated that Ukraine would finish its missiles by May. Fortunately, the West helped resupply some missiles. Additionally, Ukraine has lost at least 113 surface-to-air missile systems since the start of full-scale war. Due to the number of systems needed, it will definitely take time for modern Western air defense systems to completely replace the old systems. This could mean that most cities are protected by Soviet legacy systems and, as a result, are vulnerable to Russian hypersonic missiles and ballistic orbital missiles. Secondly, Ukrainian cities, villages, settlements, and most importantly, Ukrainian positions on the Russian border or on the front line continue to be subject to daily airstrikes. They have faced more than 884 airstrikes so far in June. During the same period, Russia has lost 1 fighter plane and 7 helicopters. This means that the vast majority of Russian air missions are allowed to deliver their payloads to Ukraine targets before successfully returning to base. A large number of drone strikes, including daily drone strikes on the Russian border, are likely never reported. As a result, several cities and villages were almost completely destroyed. Almost every day there are media reports about the demolition of residential buildings and civilian casualties. The total number of detached houses, apartments, and dormitories damaged or destroyed reach almost 558,000. It is a well-known fact that Russia does not hesitate to strike schools, kindergartens, hospitals, health facilities, energy sector facilities, workplaces, and similar places. Soldiers and civilians alike suffer casualties every day due to the lack of proper defense against missiles, bombs, and drones. Frankly, this is not exactly a sign of a solid air defense system. However, Kiev forces continue to strengthen their air defense systems day by day with the help of Western allies. No matter how limited the means, the Kiev forces continue to achieve tremendous success in the Ukrainian skies. Thanks you for watching us.